Welcome, everybody, to this special love reading event featuring Alka Joshi and her beautiful new novel, which I'm going to show here and is in the background with her as well. And it's 6 Days in Bombay. So, welcome and thank you for joining us from California.
Well, thank you, Liz. It's a gorgeous sunny day here. And, we don't have very many of those here in the summertime, strangely enough. We have a lot of what we call June gloom happening all throughout May, June, and July. But it's gorgeous and sunny today, so I'm happy to be with you.
It's sunny here as well, so we're joined in sunshine, and that's lovely. So, as an introduction to Alka, she was born in India and from the age of 9 was raised in the United States. She has a BA from Stanford University and an MFA from California College of Arts. Her debut, The Henna Artist, which you can see behind, became an immediate New York Times bestseller and has been translated into 30 languages. So, two further novels completed the Jaipur trilogy, and here we are at her fourth book. So, yes, there we go. So, we're going to be very careful not to give anything away as we talk about 6 days. And it's beautifully evocative and intimate. And also, it's actually incredibly important in terms of its time and place. So, for everybody who's yet to experience, can you give us an introduction to your new novel, please?
Yes. A famous painter arrives at a hospital in distress. She is only 29 years old. She is half Indian and she is half European. The nurse who is put in charge of her is only 26 years old. And so they have a lot of commonalities because the nurse herself is half Indian and half British. And they form this bond, they have lots of things to talk about together. And one of the coolest things that's happening is that the nurse has lived a very sheltered life. The painter has lived a very exotic, very big life. She is, very flamboyant. She does whatever she pleases. She says whatever she thinks. And the nurse is fascinated by this. When the painter dies 6 days later, at the point where she should have been recovering, her mysterious death is blamed on the nurse. But not before the nurse is bequeathed 4 paintings by this painter with a cryptic note indicating that the nurse should deliver these paintings throughout Europe to the painter's former friends and lovers. So the nurse goes on this huge journey, and in so doing, she discovers the reason why the painter died.
And it's an absolutely incredible journey. And we were talking beforehand about the fact that it's a personal journey for her, but also a journey through different countries and also history. So you mentioned that you've used an artist, or there was an artist there, and I know from reading your book that you had an artist as inspiration. So tell us how you found her and what was it about her that really called to you?
At the time that I was writing The Henna Artist, I ran across an article about a woman named Amrita Sher Gill, who was an artist living in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, died at the age of 41 very mysteriously at the age of 28. Now, I'm fascinated by her. I fly to New Delhi. And in the Museum of Modern Art there, I can see all of her paintings. 15 of her most famous paintings are there. And she is considered a national treasure in India. So her paintings are not allowed to leave India, which is why you have to go there to see them. And I thought, why isn't this woman who was painting in a very different kind of style from the 30s and 40s that were being painted elsewhere? She has more of the avant-garde European sensibility. She's been trained in Paris and Rome and Florence. And why is it that we don't know about her? I had never heard of this woman before. And so I began doing all of this research. Well, at the time, Malik, who is a character in The Henna Artist, was very prominent in my head, very prominent in my, gestalt. And so he just said, you got to write a story about me. You've got all this information. So I started writing what would become the second book in the trilogy of The Henna Artist, The Secret Keeper of Jaipur. And I set this book aside. And then when I'm finished with the trilogy, I come back to 6 days in Bombay. So I was consumed with this woman. I think, Liz, if you've ever had this kind of feeling before, I am fascinated by people who live larger than life lives, right? So people who are so confident in themselves that they don't care what anybody else thinks. Now, I care what people think. Maybe you care what people think. Most of us care what others think about us when we start saying and doing things that are sort of out of the norm.
Mm,
And she just didn't, this Amrita Shergill didn't. And I thought, what makes a woman that person? And then
mm,
also, how could somebody so healthy, so vibrant, so out there, how could she have died so young? I really wanted to delve into the mystery of her death.
yeah.
And I couldn't find anything very concrete about how she died. Now, there's all of these suppositions. Um, Her own mother thought that Amrita's husband had killed her. And so right. I mean, there's all this like scandal around it. And, people thought that maybe she had died of some botched abortion, or maybe she died of a miscarriage, or maybe she died this and that and the other. There were all these suppositions. Nobody knows exactly.
Mm,
But I thought, well, what if in fiction I could invent some way to have this happen? And then how would I go about that? I
mm,
knew that I didn't want to write from the point of view of the actual painter because I don't know her well enough, right? I've only heard about her secondhand or read about her secondhand. But what I could do is maybe tell her story from the point of view of somebody who's become very close to her
mhm,
and could look at her from that vantage point of I'm a little distant away from her, but I'm also close enough in feeling to her, wanting to be like her, that maybe I could look at both sides of her, the
mhm.
sides of her that I find fascinating, but also then the sides of her that I find a little dangerous
Yeah.
and a little uncomfortable. And
Yes.
that's what the nurse is going to discover.
Yes. So, one of the other things you've done is to actually set this in a time period where there's a lot of conflict going on. So, you've got the lengthy struggle for independence with India, and then you've also set it just before the start of the Second World War. And then you've got the internal struggles of these women as well. So, I found that that created a real intimacy as well. So, in terms of the time period, what really drew you to that particular time?
Well, the real painter died in 1941, but it was too close to World War II. And so I wanted to really investigate the interwar period. A lot of
Mhm,
people write about World War I or they write about World War II, but not necessarily the period in between. And
mhm.
can you imagine? You've just been through this huge world war as nations, and wouldn't there still be this trepidation about could it happen again?
Yeah.
Have we really, we may have won the war, but have we really won the right to be free again, to be able to say and do whatever we want again? And so I thought, okay, why don't I set this in that in between period where people are still struggling to figure out what exactly just happened? Could it happen again?
Yeah.
And then I realized at the same time in 1937, what's happening in India is that we are so close to getting the British out of the country. And so the Indians are also mounting a rebellion under the ground. All these resistance movements are taking place. Freedom fighters are hiding in this person's house and in this courtesan's, mansion and so on. And, people are sending secret messages here back and forth. So there are all of these Indians that are vying for their independence at the same time that our nurse then goes to Europe. And in Europe, she finds also
Mm,
all of these resistance movements
mm,
going on against the Nazis and the fascists. And it's just I thought it was a fascinating. I didn't even know when I started writing that I was going to find these consistencies between what was happening in Europe and what's happening in India. So essentially, the entire world is sort of in flux.
Mm,
The entire world is in this period of uncertainty, not quite sure what's going to happen. And then
mm.
there's this kind of bubbling resentment everywhere
Yes.
that we'd like things to be different, but we don't quite know how to get there.
Yeah. It was absolutely fascinating. And another thing that's fascinating as well is how social injustices feature, which still very much resonates today. So, how much does that matter to you in your writing?
I think that because of my
Mhm.
mother and father are both huge proponents of social justice. I think it's been something that we talked about at dinner table. As I was growing up, it's something that, my father, who is still alive today, talks about and really does try to do things about it. He has established scholarships for young women to be able to study engineering in India, which is something that a lot of young girls are not encouraged to do or don't have enough money to do. My mother was always making sure that we, gave money to different causes that she really believed in, including, the rights of women to be able to make all their own decisions and so on. So I think it's something that I've always grown up with. And in my writing, it just sort of naturally comes into the writing. I believe in social justice. I believe in, the ability for people to determine their own futures, especially if they have a chance at getting a great education, especially
Yeah.
if they have a chance at equalizing all of the disadvantages that they grew up with.
Yeah. So, so important. And it clearly comes across in your writing as well. So, one of the things that I loved was how human and how complicated your characters can be. So, how do you balance that in terms of nobody's either truly good or truly evil or truly wrong? How do you go about creating such a nuanced kind of complication with some of your characters?
Well, this is so interesting because I get asked this question and I don't really know uh, how how these characters come into being. They just sort of show up, and I know that as we progress throughout the story, they're going to reveal themselves to me,
Mm,
and they do. So they reveal themselves in a flaw that they have. They reveal themselves in something they say to someone that reveals, some part of them that I am kind of uncomfortable with. I'm like, oh, I'm not really sure I like you anymore, right? But then they somehow redeem themselves at some point and let me know why they think a way that I wouldn't agree with.
mhm.
So I think it's one of the most fascinating parts about being an author, that somehow these characters have been living in me, and all I am doing is giving life to them on a page. Um, One of the ways that I help them come alive is that I actually go to all of the settings that they are existing in. So I can pretend I am them and I'm walking around in all of these different areas. So
Yeah.
for 6 days in Bombay, I went to Istanbul, of course. And I had to go into the Grand Bazaar, which is, where our nurse Sona goes into. And I smelling all of the spices, interacting with the shopkeepers, figuring out that, the essence of rose is a really big thing there. And, just learning about the tea leaves that are left in a cup and how people can read your future in tea leaves and so on. So that plays a part in the novel. And then I went to Prague, and I had been to Prague in 1979 when it was still a communist
Wow.
country. When it was
Yeah.
still considered Czechoslovakia and it was
Yeah.
communist. But it was wonderful to be there. And then, of course, I find these fabulous people before I even go. I found a scholar in interwar period of that time. And
Ah.
so I met with her, lovely, lovely, lovely woman, Marianne. And she walked me through all the different areas that she thought my character would have walked through had she been there in 1937.
And that's so interesting because I was going to ask you about when you, because I knew that you travel to these locations, and it's then how do you step back in time? And that's how you've
That's
connected to
how.
people who can take you there.
Yes. Okay, so I'll tell you. So the first thing that happened, Liz, is that I started looking on the internet for scholars of the interwar period in Europe.
Yeah.
And I found a gentleman who was Czechoslovakian at one point, had come to the United States, teaches now at Boston University. I call him up. Would you talk to me about this? And he did. And he said, you might be better off going to Prague and meeting with a colleague of mine who still teaches there. So I called her from America and I said, if I come, will you please, talk with me about all of this? And she said, yes, but I also have somebody who's 96 years old who was alive during the period that you're talking about, who lives in San Diego, and you can talk to him. And so, I mean, it's amazing how once you start looking for the right people that you could harness these wonderful little anecdotes from, they just lead you from one
Yeah.
person to another to another. I mean, you just get mind-blowing stuff that is like you can't find it in a history book.
No.
Um, so yes, so then finally I do make it out to Marianne, and she takes us through. My husband came on this trip with me, and so she took us through all of the different places that my character could have gone to, and she pointed out who used to live there in a certain, villa. She pointed out the Charles Bridge where my
Yes.
character would probably have walked across. And so I'm getting a feeling for the place, and
Yeah.
I am envisioning that character. I am in her shoes, and I am walking through all of these different areas. It really helps me so much to imagine.
Well, it certainly comes across in your writing. It's just beautiful. So, talking about Sona and her being Anglo-Indian, and she's obviously torn on occasions with her identity and where her identity actually sits. So, did you were you able to sort of bring your own feelings into
Yes.
that? And
Yeah.
how did you bring that onto the page?
Yes, like identity is something that fascinates me because, I'm Indian by birth. Both my parents are Indian. I'm born in India. I'm being raised in India. I'm going to these missionary schools, which means that I am being taught by Catholic nuns,
Hmm.
but I'm actually Hindu. And this is very, prevalent. I know the Lord's Prayer backwards and forwards, believe it or not, because we had to recite it in the courtyard of the school every single morning. Um, then we moved to the United States, and suddenly I don't look like anybody else in my classes anymore. I'm in the Midwest. It's the 1960s. They haven't traveled very much outside of the country, much less outside of the state. They don't know people who look like me. They ask me if I'm Mexican. They ask me if I'm Black. They ask me if India is somewhere close to Texas. I mean, mind-blowing kinds of things now that we are all so globally aware and well-traveled and so on. And so I thought to myself, well, I don't want to be Indian because obviously these people don't know anything about India. And whatever they are replaying to me about India is not positive. It's all negative perceptions about poverty and cows running in the streets everywhere and, Muslims and Hindus hating each other and so on. And I just like it's as a kid, that wasn't my reality.
Hmm.
So I didn't really understand what was going on. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to be American. But, when you are from another country and you make America your home, you are never 100% that you came from or the country that you've adopted. You're never 100%. And so I have always struggled with this identity. Like, who am I more like? Whom do I owe my loyalty to? Am I owing my loyalty to India? Am I owing my loyalty to America? But I know that whenever anybody says anything negative about India, I bristle. Like I'm like, oh, I have to defend this country that I'm from. But if somebody says something, horrible about the United States, I also bristle. I also want to defend the United States. So my loyalty is a little divided. It's a little torn, but it's also sort of all encompassing. And I can see positives and negatives both sides because I'm looking at both of them from afar.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to Sona, who is half Indian and half British, she has that same thing going on in her. Who am I? Am I more British? Am I more Indian? I'm growing up in India, but everybody can see from my fair complexion and the way that I look that I must have, some kind of Western, heritage. And so, yeah, everybody assumes that after 200 years of the British being in India, her father must be, British.
Yeah.
And in 1937,
Yeah.
when so many Indians are really ready for the British to leave, her presence is a little unsettling for them. They realize that she is the enemy. She is part of what the problem is in the country.
Mm.
And so she is in a little bit of a precarious position. And I wanted her to be in that position because I think it makes her a little, very cautious about what she says and what she does and how she's doing it. But internally, she really feels more Indian. So she's more sympathetic to the Indian plight. On the other hand, she knows that her father deserted her and her mother and her little brother when she was only 3 years old. And so she is hating on that dad. She's like, hey, why did he leave us in a lurch? My mother has really suffered since then. She has had to figure out some way to feed, two children. And her little brother dies because there's not enough money to give him the kind of health care that he needs.
Yeah.
And so, she really resents that
Yeah.
father.
Yeah.
So this is a part of her that she cannot seem to reconcile.
Yeah.
And in the same way that I can't seem to reconcile my dual identity. And so I really wanted to explore that. Now she sees the painter, her patient who has no problem with her dual identity. She can put on a beautiful sari on for one occasion and the painter can also put on this beautiful Parisian outfit that she has just bought in Paris. She has no problem switching back and forth and being both one and the other at the same time, which our nurse Sona finds fascinating.
Yeah. It is absolutely fascinating. So, um, can you describe India in just 5 words? And I know this is difficult
Ooh, that's a hard
because
question. Okay,
to
okay,
someone
I'll
who's
start.
never been.
Okay, vibrant, colorful, energetic, constantly evolving. And okay, now there's so many other adjectives, but I guess I will choose one out of all of them, and that would be people with the warmest personalities you have ever met.
And do you know what? That's Sona. Those 5 words. It really is.
Oh,
That's really
oh, I haven't.
interesting.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's her.
yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
lovely.
that,
That was really nice because I thought that was going to be such a difficult question for you just to pick 5 words.
Yeah. And
So,
those are, Liz, that's what I discovered when I started going back to India after a 36-year hiatus. That is what I found India to be. And it's
yeah,
something that I had totally forgotten about
yeah,
because I hadn't been back and because I had sort of bought into the idea of what, every American was replaying to me about the negative parts of India. But when I went back, I thought, oh my gosh, what an amazing culture this is. Look at how rich it is. Look at how many thousands of years it's been
yeah,
in existence.
yeah,
And these people are still thriving and um, still very excited to get up every morning and do whatever it is they need to do for their families, for their lives, to grow. to expand their horizons. The Indians are a very vibrant people.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Um, so I'm going to ask you one last question, and actually, I could go on talking to you forever. Um, but one last question. So, during your writing career, what has surprised you the most? Because you came to this
So
later,
late in life.
and I know that you're also one of Forbes 50 over 50 list, which is quite incredible. So, was that it, or what has surprised you most in your writing career?
I think that what a great question. What has surprised me the most? I think the fact that writing came so easily to me when I didn't even realize that I could do it. And I don't mean easily in terms of like, oh, all of a sudden I could just write a book, but that I could describe things so clearly and put them down on paper, and then my imagination would take over and I would go from one scene to another without even stressing about what's going to happen next. It was amazing to me because I really felt like I'm a repository of these stories, and all I have done is open a door, and the door is spilling all of these characters and the plot and everything out there for everyone to read. So I think that's been one of the most surprising things about this journey, that I'm not having to stress about where the stories are coming from or what's going to happen next. It just seems to come out of something I'm holding on to. Maybe it's a reincarnation of all the lives I have lived before this. We get to live, 7 lives. And so, that's maybe this is my seventh, and all of the stories I'm telling are from the other six. Um, but I think another thing that has surprised me is the embracing of these stories by readers, that there are so many people who are now understanding India and wanting to go to India, a place that they never would have thought about going before. And if I have been able to encourage people to look at India in a more positive light and to think about it as some place that they might want to go to someday, then I feel like I have done something tremendous, something that is even beyond writing these stories. I feel like I have given people a window into India that they may not ever have been able to look through before.
And yes, you certainly have. And just to say, you very definitely have a gift. You very definitely have a gift with your writing. And for this beautiful book, 6 Days in Bombay, everybody, I can highly recommend it. It certainly took me to India and to Europe as well, and through time. And I would just like to say thank you so much, Alka. That was lovely talking to you. As I say, I could keep going on, but we have to finish now. So thank you, everybody. 6 Days in Bombay by the gorgeous Alka Joshi. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And by the way, we have some good sex scenes in there.
We'll keep that in. We will keep that in.